Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking an absolutely fascinating high-stakes historical account right out of Genesis chapter 14. It's a story that sets up this ultimate age-old tension, the clash between worldly ambition and spiritual integrity. We're going to be looking at a massive ancient regional war, a daring midnight rescue mission, and a crazy valley showdown between two very different kings who are offering two very different kinds of wealth.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered how we can handle massive success without, losing our soul in the process? It's a question that rings just as true in today's cutthroat corporate world as it did literally 4,000 years ago in the ancient Middle East. So today, we're going to explore what happens when we chase prosperity at the expense of our principles. And as you'll see, true victory, it requires a whole lot more than just winning a battle on the field. It requires guarding your heart right after the win. So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to quickly cover the ancient world at war, Lot's captivity and choices, Abram's courageous rescue mission, Melchizedek's spiritual blessing, the king of Sodom's temptation, and finally, we'll wrap up with modern workplace integrity.
All right, part one, the ancient world at war.
To really grasp the scale of this story, we've kind of got to look at the historical geopolitics of the time. We are talking about a massive regional conflict here. 4 powerful Mesopotamian kings, led by this guy named Chedorlaomer, marched over 1,000 kilometers into the land of Canaan. Now, to put that into perspective, that is a huge distance for an ancient army. And for 12 years, 5 local kings in the Dead Sea region, and yeah, that includes the infamous kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, were forced to serve and pay these super heavy tributes to Chedorlaomer. Well, in the 13th year, they finally decided they'd had enough, right? They rebelled. But by the 14th year, those 4 Mesopotamian kings returned with an absolute vengeance. And strategically, they didn't just march straight to the rebels. Oh no. They swept through the outer regions first, utterly destroying 6 different tribes. We're talking nations of giants and fearsome warriors here, basically clearing the surrounding nations before finally turning their crosshairs on those 5 rebel kings. So, the 5 rebel kings chose the Sodom Valley as their battleground. This is the Dead Sea region, which is literally the lowest point on Earth. They honestly thought they had this massive tactical advantage because the valley was just full of natural asphalt, basically these huge tar pits. They figured they could use this harsh, sticky geography to bog down the invading army, but their plan completely backfired. Disastrously. When they started losing the battle and actually tried to flee, they fell right into their own tar pits. It is just a profound metaphor when you think about it. When you build your security on the dark, sticky systems of the world, those very environments become your ultimate trap. They thought the terrain was their greatest asset, but it literally became their downfall.
Moving on to part two, Lot's captivity and choices.
So the fallout of this grand regional war had a direct, devastating human cost. Abram's nephew Lot was taken captive, along with basically all of Sodom's wealth and food. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between two very different mindsets. Remember, Lot had previously separated from Abram because he was chasing the most prosperous geography. He looked at those well-watered plains and pitched his tent right near Sodom, basically chasing the ancient equivalent of hustle culture wealth. He chose economic advantage over spiritual safety. And his spiritual outcome? Well, he assimilated into a totally compromised culture. And eventually, the very world he loved stripped him of absolutely everything. Abram, on the flip side, sought God over geography. He chose to settle peacefully by the oaks of Mamre. His path of integrity eventually led to a true victory, proving that worldly wealth is incredibly fragile.
Which brings us to part 3.
When a survivor actually managed to escape the battle and told Abram the Hebrew that his nephew had been taken captive, the narrative urgency of this story immediately shifts into high gear. Abram was living in spiritual peace, sure, but true peace doesn't mean just ignoring a brother in need. So Abram sprang into action. He didn't have some massive national army, but he did have exactly 318 trained men from his own household. Now, the hidden meaning behind this highly specific number is completely fascinating. In Hebrew, numerical values are tied to letters. The numerical value of the name of Abram's head servant, a guy named Eliezer, adds up exactly to 318. And the name Eliezer? It translates to God is help. So this subtly communicates that Abram wasn't just relying on his own numbers against this massive imperial army. He was literally bringing God's help into the battle.
And Abram's military strategy was brilliant. He didn't just sit back and pray and do nothing, right? Bold faith and tactical courage go hand in hand. Step 1. He utilized the cover of night, moving in complete stealth.
Step 2, he divided his highly loyal household-trained forces for a surprise attack, which struck absolute chaos into the enemy camp. And Step 3, he relentlessly pursued the invaders all the way to Dan. Now, Dan was the northernmost boundary of the land, roughly 200 kilometers away. I mean, think about that kind of stamina for a second. It's incredible. He utterly defeated them, rescuing Lot, the people, and recovering every single piece of the plundered wealth.
Let's look at Part 4, Melchizedek's spiritual blessing. Now, as Abram returns from this monumental victory, the pace of our story really slows down. He enters the valley of Sheva, also known as the King's Valley. And here, two kings come out to meet him. The first is Melchizedek. His name literally translates to King of Righteousness, and he rules a place called Salem, which means peace. As the priest of the Most High God, Melchizedek is an incredibly mysterious and profound figure in biblical history. He serves as a really powerful prefiguration of Jesus Christ, uniting those roles of a righteous king and the ultimate high priest. And notice exactly what he brings with him. He doesn't bring demands for tribute or taxes. He brings bread and wine. He offers this life-giving spiritual supply to restore and refresh Abram after the heavy battle, which points directly forward to the communion Christ would later offer.
Melchizedek blesses Abram, declaring that it was the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, who delivered those enemies into his hand. And in response, Abram gives Melchizedek a tenth of all the spoils. This 10% tithe was Abram's definitive way of maintaining reverence and humility right in the face of massive success. He basically acknowledged that his victory didn't come from his own tactical genius or his 318 men. The creator of heaven and earth was the true source of his victory.
Next up, Part 5, the King of Sodom's Temptation. But right after this beautiful spiritual high with Melchizedek, Abram is confronted by this second king waiting in that valley, the King of Sodom. Now, what's really interesting about this is the contrast between these two encounters. Melchizedek brings bread, wine, and a spiritual blessing. The King of Sodom, however, brings a temptation. He walks up to Abram and says, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." Now, in the original text, that literally translates to "give me the souls." He is offering immense worldly wealth in exchange for human lives. This brilliantly illustrates a key spiritual truth. Your greatest danger often isn't out there on the battlefield fighting the obvious enemy. No, the greatest danger is the deceptive temptation of pride and compromise that hits you immediately after you've won the victory. But Abram, he sees right through the trap. He responds with this incredibly powerful declaration. He says, "I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing, from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich." I love that. Abram definitively rejects that corrupt wealth. He absolutely refuses to let the king of a sinful system claim credit for his prosperity. He maintains his absolute independence from the world's systems to fiercely protect God's glory and, of course, to uphold his own integrity.
Let's bring this home with Part 6, Modern Workplace Integrity.
So, what does this all mean for us? How does this ancient historical account translate to the daily tension we face in our modern careers or businesses? Well, first, recognize the hidden traps in seemingly generous compromises. When a toxic corporate culture offers you the world, always look for the strings attached. Second, guard your integrity most carefully right after a major success. Seriously, that's exactly when your ego is inflated and your guard is down. Third, never trade your spiritual principles for material gain. Essentially, don't trade souls for goods. Fourth, trust the Most High God as your ultimate provider. And finally, respect others' choices. Notice that Abram allowed his allies to take their fair share without forcing his personal convictions on them, but he absolutely refused to compromise his own duty to God. So the crucial point is this: the world, much like the King of Sodom, will always try to inflate the value of material wealth, secretly hoping you'll exchange your spiritual integrity for it. But just as Lot learned the incredibly hard way, material wealth derived from compromised environments is fleeting. It can be captured, lost, and completely burned away. Spiritual integrity, rooted in the Most High God, is what brings lasting peace and true victory. Which leaves us with one final, deeply personal question to think about. When you win your battles, when you reach your own Valley of the Kings, and the world offers you its wealth in exchange for your principles, will you have the courage to say no? Think about where your true provision comes from and protect your integrity at all costs. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you on the next one.